joining us tonight for this panel called Making the Switch from Fossil Fuel to Renewable Heat. And I am your host, Olga Peters. I am a reporter with the Commons, as well as the host and producer for the Montpelier Happy Hour. Just so everyone knows, the goal for tonight's discussion is to help educate the community on what it takes to convert their home or business from using a fossil fuel heating system to renewables. And also we will touch on some of the financial supports and incentives that are available with the state and through the state to help make some of these infrastructure changes more affordable in your home or business. For the purposes of tonight's discussion, we're using a semi-case study of a current project that is happening at a downtown building in Brattleboro. And owner Ben Rankin, who you'll meet in a moment, is switching from coal. I had no idea that there are still buildings in Brattleboro that use coal, but there are. And to biomass, specifically wood. And right now, the boilers that the building has, it is right on the corner of Elliott Street and Harmony parking lot. 2 coal burners, they burn about, I believe, nod to me, Ben, 50 tons of coal about a year. Yeah. So looking to cut that down quite a bit. This panel tonight is sponsored by Brattleboro's Town Energy Committee. And this committee, if you're not aware, tries to assist residents, businesses, and organizations and town offices to improve the energy efficiency of their building. And they are hoping to achieve some of the goals that are laid out in the Global Warming Solutions Act that Vermont signed onto last year, I believe it was. And the main goal is to be carbon neutral by 2050. And the committee works in partnership with the town's sustainability coordinator, Stephen Dodson, and also with a range of private and public and government programs and officials. So before I introduce you to our panelists who are waiting very patiently, just a little bit of housekeeping. We plan at about 7 to break for some questions to hear from folks. This is important. If you are online, please put your question in the chat function and send it to everyone rather than to me or to one of the panelists, because we might not see it. We're not monitoring the chat during the panel. So please send your question to everyone in the chat function. If you are using the phone to call in, when question times come, thank you, Sue Fillion, who is kind of manning everything in the background. You will use *6 to unmute yourself. And without further ado, let's introduce our panelists. So if you're just joining us, I am Olga Peters. I'm a reporter with the Commons, as well as the Montpelier Happy Hour. I would like to also introduce Emma Hansen. She is the Wood Energy Coordinator with the Vermont Department of Forests, Recreation, and Parks. Emma is a leading voice for advanced wood heating in Vermont. She has a unique background in working with lands policy, advocacy, and sales, and is very enthusiastic about renewable energy. Next, we have Ben Rankin, who is the property owner I mentioned. He's a sustainable developer. He recently bought a building in downtown Brattleboro that hosts the Harmony Arts Collective, Scissor Masters, 17 apartments, and some antique boilers that still burn coal. Ben develops projects that involve either affordable housing or industrial waste and energy reduction. Next, we have Susan Belleville. Thank you for joining us, Susan. She is a real estate broker with Belleville Realty in Brattleboro. She helps residential and commercial clients find the right solution for their energy needs. She is currently managing the Grange block and working to convert that building to biomass and energy production. Finally, last but not least, Nathan Mascolino. I hope I said that right, Nathan.
Yep.
He is the senior energy consultant with Efficiency Vermont. He is also a licensed professional LEED certified, that's LEED, with 15 years of experience designing heating and cooling systems with a focus on renewables, including wood fuel for commercial and residential customers. So thank you, everyone who is here with us tonight. I am looking forward to this conversation. I want to turn it first to Emma. I would love, Emma, if you could give us a really high level view of what is wood heat / biomass, and how does it work from a forestry perspective in Vermont?
Sure. I'm gonna do one better than a high level view. I think everyone when I'm done talking, I hope everyone has a new fun fact that they will go and tell their friends about wood heat and why it's awesome for Vermont. So let's get some screen sharing going and make sure my monitors are all in the right place. All right, thumbs up if that looks like what you expect to be seeing as far as full screen presentation.
You want to go into presentation mode, Emma.
Thank you. How's that?
Perfect.
Nice.
Great. Thank you, guys. All right, great. So I am Emma Hansen. Like Olga said, I'm the Wood Energy Coordinator at the Vermont Department of Forest, Parks, and Rec. And this is sort of what I do. This is fair to ask, what is a Wood Energy Coordinator? Because I'm pretty sure I'm the only person with that title. So it's not likely a job you've encountered before. But my job is to really spread the word about why wood heat is uniquely good for Vermont as a local renewable option and alternative to fossil fuels, and particularly why it's good for our forests and our forest health here. Today, I'm going to, in a very concise but thorough manner, answer your burning questions, mainly what is advanced wood heat? Why is it so good for our forest? How exactly do I use it? And then like all of those sticky questions about carbon and greenhouse gases that are lurking in the back of your mind. And then also, does it make financial sense? Which Nathan and I will answer together. So what is advanced wood heat? Let's start here. So humans have been heating with wood, give or take forever, but we've only just gotten really good at it in the past 30 years or so. So when we're talking about advanced wood heat, we're talking about really efficient, really impressively engineered products that get the most possible energy out of wood and do it in a really sophisticated way. Okay, so we're talking about things like from a new EPA certified wood stove that burns really cleanly, all the way up to a fully automated appliance that can be programmed with a thermostat. So the same hands-free heating convenience you're used to with a fossil fuel system. So all automated wood heat is advanced, but not all advanced wood heat is automated, right? Because a wood stove isn't attached to a thermostat on your wall. Now, right off the bat, I want to clear up a giant misconception that I'm hearing all the time lately. And I want all of you to leave this Zoom meeting with nothing else as my little army to help me spread the word to help clear up this misconception. So wood heat and biomass electric are not the same thing. They unfortunately share a lot of nouns, which makes it reasonably confusing. But all of the negative headlines you see that say things like trees are the new coal or things to that effect are invariably referring to the southeastern pellet market, the southeastern United States, taking pellets made from trees that are farmed on plantation style forestry and then turned into pellets shipped across the Atlantic Ocean and co-fired in coal plants in the United Kingdom to generate electricity. What we do in the Northeast is practice responsible forest management. So when we're done, it still looks like a forest. And then we turn those into wood pellets and chips to be used to generate heat here locally in the Northeast. And we use those to displace fossil fuels. Now, there's are two entirely different environmental and greenhouse gas impact profiles. It's really, really important to draw this distinction because it's like super frustrating that they have so many common nouns such as biomass, trees, pellets. Like this is so reasonable that people get confused about this, but really distinctive. Generating electricity from pellets is only about 20 to 25% efficient, whereas what we can do with wood heating appliances is, 89 to 95% efficient. Like, it's not the same thing at all. And all right, now that we've cleared that up, let's carry on. Okay, so I think the next important thing is to remind us again that I work for the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation. And why does Forest, Parks, and Rec have skin in the game of wood heat? And it is about the forest. Vermont is 76% forested, 80% of which is privately owned. We're currently harvesting less than half the net growth in the forest, meaning that there is more wood in the forest than we are cutting and using. But markets for low-grade wood are evolving, right? So I'm going to talk about more specifically what low-grade wood here is in a second, but I would really draw attention to the fact of what are we doing right now, right? We are on a Zoom meeting. We are in the digital age. And traditionally in our area, paper has been the main market for low-grade wood. But as we've clearly moved away from that, those markets are changing, and wood heat can be a solution to how this is starting to look. This is really where our concern comes in as a department, is we don't want to see forest fragmentation. And where Vermont is losing forest land is to suburban and agricultural development. It's not to clear cut forests as part of something else. It's for development. We're losing about 2,000 acres a year to this ag and housing developments. And we don't want to see this, right? We want to reduce the economic pressure on forest landowners to fragment and develop their lands, because we want to keep those big forest parcels intact so that we have all of those water system benefits, all those habitat benefits, all the carbon sequestration and storage benefits. We want to see all those big pieces stay intact. And while it may seem counterintuitive in first, wood heat represents a really important market that enables this to happen and reduce the economic pressures on landowners to fragment and develop their land. So for those of you that aren't aware, when you perform a forest management plan or execute a forest management plan and carry out a log job, there's two kinds of wood that come out of the forest. There's high grade wood and low grade wood. I wish we had more elegant names for them, but that's what we've got. So high grade wood is wood that is ultimately going to go to a sawmill. So that's wood that's high quality, it's straight, it's true, and that's going to ultimately become something like a 2x4, a floorboard, a cabinet. You want that beautiful Vermont sourced farm table in your kitchen. That is high grade wood. And the other kind of wood, which is a roughly 70% of a log job, is low grade wood. Now that's wood that's crooked, bent, not a terribly useful species, diseased, whatever it may be. And that is what has traditionally gone to become paper, firewood, and pulp. But like I said, we're not really using paper anymore, especially this year, since none of us are using office paper because we aren't in offices. That demand just isn't there. So wood heat is able to take the place of paper, or at least some of it, not even close to all of it, but take the place of paper to help keep those markets robust. So without healthy, robust markets for both types, that's where we start to see problems and where landowners start to feel like selling off 5 acres here, 5 acres there, 100 acres there, starts to seem like a more compelling idea. So just what goes on in the woods exactly? I think that there is sometimes some conceptions that it's the Wild West out there, but it's not. It's like the really well organized Northeast out there. And so what's happened? So Vermont is, like I said, 80% privately owned and of the forest land. And more than half of that, which is over 2 million acres, is enrolled in the Use Value Appraisal Program, which you may also have heard referred to as UVA or current use. And that just more appropriately puts a tax value on forest land, right? Because the forest land doesn't have roads that are maintained running through it, doesn't have any sort of public services. It taxes it at a more appropriate value for large forest parcels, minimum of 25 acres. So that it's easier for those landowners to keep those large forest parcels intact. which is our goal. Now, when someone has a parcel enrolled in UVA, they have to develop a forest management plan with a forester. Now, forester is one of two jobs that's going to have a role here. There's foresters and there's loggers. Foresters, in order to be certified in the state of Vermont, which they have to be, at a minimum, they have an associate's degree, but for the most part, they have bachelor's and many even have master's degrees. These are really highly educated people that went into forestry because they really like being outside, they really like forests, and they wanted to try to be in the forest as much as possible. That's who we're dealing with. And this is who develops a plan with the landowner, depending on whatever that landowner's priorities are. And that may be to develop high value saw timber, but it might be to encourage more songbirds on habitat on their land. It might be for bears, it might be for deer, it might be for water quality issues. They might have a special priority on wanting to sequester as much carbon on their land as possible. And they might have all of those things because it's possible to manage for multiple goals at the same time. But they'll work with a forester to come up with a plan, and then they will execute that plan as the plan says. These plans span 10 to 40 years. So then every few decades, as the plan prescribes, they will carry out of the harvest. And that's where the logger comes in. And the logger is the person that actually cuts the trees that the forester indicates him or her to cut. So forester decides what trees get cut. Logger actually physically cuts and removes said trees. Now, wood heat is great for Vermont for a few reasons. In addition to keeping forests as forests by providing valuable markets, it's also just makes more sense for us, right? We don't have oil here. And when Vermonters heat with fossil fuels, 80 cents of every dollar they spend on those fossil fuels leave the state, leave our local economy. And so many of us here try to buy local to support our local farms. This is just sort of the next logical step. So when you heat with locally sourced wood fuels, the inverse of that is true. And 80 cents of every dollar actually stays here in the state, circulating in our local economy and creating local jobs. Now we have two main goals here that are pertinent to wood heat. The big one that I bet everyone has heard of is getting to 90% renewable energy by the year 2050. And then the unsung hero of that goal is getting to 35% of just our thermal energy needs, right? Because we have thermal, electric, and transportation as the three pieces of our energy pie. So 35% of our thermal energy needs from wood heat by the year 2030. So why 35? I think sometimes people think I say 35 just because that sounds like it's kind of achievable number, but it's actually based on a study that we did on how much low-grade wood growth there is in Vermont's forests, how much of our thermal energy needs could we meet from wood heat conservatively without sacrificing forest health. So we did this study in 2010, and that's the study on which we based this goal. We actually redid that study in 2019, and we found out that there's even more low-grade wood growth in the forest than we thought before. So we could have set a higher goal, but that's okay. 35% is an excellent goal. So it's a very conservative estimate of how much we could reach just from Vermont. So not even sourcing from other states. And if we did reach that goal, we would displace 40 million gallons of fossil fuel every year. And we estimate that Vermonters would save about $120 million every year. So right now, this is my dog. She's a big wood heat enthusiast. Right now, Vermont gets 23% of its thermal energy from wood. I know you're thinking, in the scope of renewable energy goals, 23 is kind of close to 35. This sounds like we're doing great, except that we've been at 23 for a long time. Vermont has a very strong cultural history of heating with wood. So it's that 12 percentage point gap that's really the crux of our goal here. And about 2 in 5 Vermonters heat either in full or in part with wood. Very common to, for example, have an oil boiler, but heat your wood stove primarily and have that oil boiler for backup. So what does getting to 35% look like? It could look like any number of things, but we mapped out one scenario that seems plausible. And getting to that goal would look like adding an additional 40,000 pellet stoves, 10,000 residential pellet boilers, 2,500 commercial pellet boilers, and 200 commercial chip systems. So I'm going to quickly go through the 3 different wood fuel types. So we have on the left chips, middle cordwood, everyone knows that one, and on the right wood pellets. And we'll talk about their different applications. So cordwood, one we're all the most familiar with, 4x4x8 stack of split stacked wood. Pros, DIYable. You can go outside, get it done. If a tree falls across my driveway, you better believe that's going to be my stove next year. Super affordable. Cons, so much room for user error. This is cordwood's one downfall, is you can burn it too green, you can let it get wet, you can let things smolder. There's lots of ways to let this go wrong, but as many pros as well, namely that it's just always there. Now, when we're talking about expanding wood heat and talking about cordwood, I want to be clear that I'm not talking about adding anything that looks like any of these things. You can't even really be mad at that van because that's just kind of amazing in its own special way, but we don't want anyone else to do that. We'll just admire that one from afar. But what we do want to see installed are things that look like these, lovely EPA certified, very clean burning boilers, furnaces, and stoves. Just a quick note on a fireplace. If you have a fireplace and someone asks you if you heat with wood and you say yes, you have answered the question wrong. Because wood fireplaces are not a heating appliance. They're decorative, they're super cozy, but they suck warm air out of your house and send it up your chimney and create a lot of pollution in the process. Wood stoves provide 3 times the amount of heat as a fireplace with 1/3 of the wood. It's not even close, but it's okay. There's a solution, and it's called a fireplace insert. So you can turn your fireplace into either a wood stove or a pellet stove with just a trip down to your local stove shop. And then you too can say yes to the question, do you heat with wood? All right, so wood pellets. Wood pellets are made of 100% compressed sawdust. There's no adder, there's no glue. They look like rabbit food because under heat and pressure, the lignins in it become a natural glue that binds them together into that funny little shape. Because they are small and evenly shaped, they're able to flow through appliances much like a liquid fuel, which is why we're able to use them in automated forms such as pellet stoves, pellet boilers. They burn super clean because they're super dry, much less user error because we've taken all that out by having it made off-site and then it comes to you. They're sold both in bags, like this young gentleman is showing us here, and also in bulk form. So you can burn wood pellets in a wood pellet stove like you see here, which in many ways is similar to a wood stove in that it's a space heater in the corner of your room, but it requires way less attention than a wood stove. You know, I often refer to my wood stove as an infant in some ways, you know, like you can't really leave it alone. It needs attention every couple of hours, even though I have a very good one. And a pellet stove, on the other hand, is a teenager, right? You can leave it alone all day. It'll be fine. You need to check in on it every day, but like it's fine. So they have a large hopper loaded up with pellets in the morning, set the thermostat, go to work. Your house will still be warm when you get back. Done. Or you can burn them in a pellet boiler or furnace. Now, this is when we're really getting into exciting top of the line, super advanced technology. You can buy like a just okay oil furnace. You can't really buy a just okay pellet boiler. These are all really amazing pieces of technology that are coming from Austria, where they've been doing this for years, and they're very impressive. Now, what does this look like with your house exactly? This looks in some ways like I'm putting up a diagram of like heating with oil or propane, because there's a bulk fuel truck comes to your house, pumps in your fuel, and then you turn a thermostat, the fuel goes to your boiler, and then you have heat and hot water. It should all seem very familiar because it's the same thing, except that it's pellets. If you're looking at this and thinking, well, shoot, guess it's not for me because my architect didn't put a pellet room in my house, it's okay. There's a solution for just about every house out there, whether that's a bag in your basement, a box in your basement, or an outdoor storage solution. I've yet to see an application where we couldn't figure something out that would work really well for a pellet storage solution at someone's home. I live in Facein, And my town office happens to have a pellet boiler, and every year at town meeting, the select board really enjoys telling us how much money we saved every year. And this is just a very small commercial application. This is really, it's like a residential size application. Like the little hometown pride here. Great. And then the last one is wood chips. So wood chips are a great application for really large commercial facilities. This is a very simple fuel. Wood chips are quite literally logs chipped and then end user. That's the whole song and dance. They're very affordable fuel because that song and dance is so short. And so but they require a more expensive setup to begin with, but they make sense in those really large scale applications. This is the National Life Building where the Forest Parks and Rec offices are in Montpelier. All right, so let's have a chat here about particulate matter emissions. So heating does create particulate matter emissions, which is harmful to human health. However, we've gotten so much better at this. So older wood stoves and boilers can be a legitimate concern that should be addressed with stove change-up programs and other ways to clean it up. But for large scale installations, there are air pollution control devices and filters and controls that are able to really reduce that down to a point where it's not a concern. Just to paint one particular picture. So on the far right, we're looking at the particulate matter emissions coming out of an outdoor wood boiler or a non-certified EPA wood stove. So roughly pre-1990, that's when they started certifying them. And then if you just drop from that, so a non-certified stove to a certified stove, it's a 75% drop in PM emissions. And then you can see where a pellet stove is even less, and a pellet boiler is near on with parity with an oil boiler or a propane boiler. And I always think that this is an interesting comparison to share with folks. I'll walk you through this here. So on the left, this pie shows us that residential users, so homeowners, use 52% of all of the wood fuels used in Vermont, both for heating and for electricity. I'll say it again, residential users use 52% of all of the wood for wood energy. On the right, we see that residential users create 94% of the PM emissions. So like, that's crazy, right? So to unpack that, that tells us two things. One, the big commercial installations are doing a great job, right? Those installations have air quality permits from the Department of Environmental Conservation, and they are doing well. They are run automatically. They have staff, they have filters. They're doing a very good job. It also tells us that residential users need to up their game a little bit, right? We need to get rid of those older underperforming stoves and boilers. We need to make sure that we're actually burning dry wood and not green wood. To really drive that point home, if you see smoke coming out of your chimney, that is a sign that something is awry. And this is something I see all the time. It looks a little bit like a Norman Rockwell painting until you learn that smoke coming out of a stove is simply unburnt fuel and it's pollution. When you have a stove that's burning really well, there should be no visible smoke coming out of your chimney whatsoever, except maybe a little bit at startup and a little bit at shutdown. But in the middle, all you should see is water vapor or nothing at all. So odds are if you see stove coming out of your chimney, it's either a stove that's just an older model, ought to your place. It's not getting a complete burn. You're burning it too cold, or your wood is green. So we want to avoid all of those because you're sending literally time and money up and out of your chimney when you see that happening. You're lining your chimney with creosote, which can lead to a potential chimney fire, and you're also adding to pollution. Okay, and to get, okay. All right, so people sometimes get concerned about, okay, well, PM emissions. If we add all those pellet boilers that you said we're going to add, isn't that going to increase the amount of PM emissions in the air? And I'm like, yes, except that is why we have stove change-up programs. Because one non-EPA certified stove emits the same amount of particulate matter emissions as 200 pellet boilers. All right, so for every one stove we remove, we can install 200 pellet boilers and maintain the status quo. Or we can, only install 100 and then have a net reduction in PM emissions. So we are removing stoves way more quickly than we're keeping with this 200 pellet boiler ratio. So we are definitely on track for air quality improvements. Oh, there's 200 pellet boilers. Okay. How am I doing here? 8, okay. I'm in the final stretch here. All right, so to switch gears to carbon, which is the other concern that people have about heating with wood, which I understand. I am also very concerned about climate change. Wood heat is actually a remarkably good solution for Vermont. Doesn't necessarily make sense everywhere, but for Vermont, it does. And this is just a quote from the IPCC that I'll just read quickly because it's easier to. In the long term, a sustainable forest management strategy aimed at maintaining or increasing forest carbon stocks while producing an annual sustained yield of timber, fiber, or energy from the forest will generate the largest sustained mitigation benefit. We'll unpack that here a little bit, but basically what that means is keep forest as forest, manage for carbon sequestration and storage, and also other things. It's a yes and situation. We need all the tools in our toolbox for this one. So a log is a carbon battery of sorts. It can only contain so much carbon. It contains a fixed amount of carbon at the time it's cut. So then whether or not it's fell over in a storm and biodegrades on the forest floor or ends up being used as heat in someone's stove, it can still only emit X pounds of carbon or X tons of carbon. It doesn't change depending on what its ultimate final destination is. It is very possible to manage for all the things on a particular piece of land, to manage for both carbon and timber or wildlife or whatever your other goals are. We can do it all. And the far, far, far greater risk as in Vermont, as far as carbon storage and sequestration of forest goes, is to lose the forest land in the first place. So our number one goal needs to be keep forests as forests. And part of how we do that is making that economically possible. Now, to look at a comparison of CO2 emissions from various fuels, you hear a lot of talk and debates about is biomass or wood heat carbon neutral. No, our stance at FBR is that it's carbon better. Like, we're not trying to say that it's carbon neutral. It is substantially carbon better, and it is so much better for Vermont. So you can see here as a comparison, looking at all the wood fuels on the right compared to fossil fuels. I mean, this is one of those like, oh man, great. So we can switch to a wood fuel, dramatically reduce our carbon emissions from day one, and also keep forests as forests, that we can keep sequestering and storing carbon in those forests and keep dollars local. Win, 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 win. The other thing to keep in mind about trees and carbon is this sort of simple diagram, right? So if we as humans had never figured out fossil fuels, we wouldn't be in this pickle. We could burn wood for heat and it would be a non-issue, because wood heat is part of the biogenic carbon cycle of carbon that's always been in the atmosphere, right? Trees absorb it, they die, they fall over, they emit it, and then it happens all over again. But then we introduce this other variable of fossil fuels from the ground, and that has landed us in this situation. So it's important to keep in mind that there's two different sources. And again, just to drive it home, this is from one of my favorite pieces. I think it came out 2 years ago now, just crazy. A collaboration between UMass Amherst and UVM on forest carbon. And I highly recommend looking it up. It is written for an audience of landowners, not foresters. So it's very readable for the layperson who doesn't have a bachelor's degree in forestry. And this is one of my favorite quotes from it, which is that keeping forest as forest is the single most important action a family forest owner can take to maintain forest carbon sequestration and storage, reducing the impact of climate change. So again, I can't drive that home enough. Keep forest as forest. And then this isn't specifically carbon, but I think it's interesting because I guarantee at least one person here is thinking to themselves, what about all of the equipment needed to make wood fuels and, you know, chainsaws and trucks and stuff? I'm like, yes. But so what that question is, it's about the embedded fossil fuels. So this is a fun slide that looks at the ratio of energy return on investment. So you've put fossil fuels in, but how much energy are you getting out? And you can see that corn ethanol, so what you get 10% of in your car when you fill up, is 1-to-1, right? You've put fossil fuel in and you get exactly the same amount of energy from that ethanol out. Whereas it starts to get dramatically better when we move into the wood fuels. And they use 15-to-1 for pellets, 35-to-1 from cordwood, good stuff. And then Nathan's going to cover the incentives, but just so I don't leave you totally hanging on what all these things cost, before any incentives. So these look like big sticker shock numbers, but I swear they're going to come down. You're just going to have to wait to see by how much. Pellet boilers installed at a residential level, about 20,000. Pellet stoves, about 4. Wood stoves, about 3. Wood chip boilers, loads and loads and loads. But again, the fuel cost is so low that can still be worthwhile. And will you save money? The answer is yeah, but I can't tell you exactly when, because that will vary depending on the incentive amount and also the current price of fuel to compare it to. So you can see here in my squiggly line slide that the red and blue lines in the middle that are vacillating wildly up and down, those are fossil heating fuels, whereas down at the bottom is where you see the wood fuel sort of happily chugging along with the cost of inflation, along with natural gas, but that doesn't really help as much, and cold climate heat pumps, which are a great option in the right application. So you should feel excellent about heating with wood, because it keeps those dollars local, displaces fossil fuels, keeps forest and forest, and you might even save some money in the process. That's a good deal. Phew, all right, thank you guys.
Thank you, Emma, appreciate it. I hope that's given everyone a good foundation on wood heat. I want to go to both Susan Belville and Ben Rankin right now. And I'd like to hear from both of you why you felt replacing the coal boilers at the downtown building with wood heat was the best option for heating both the commercial spaces and the 17 apartments.
Go for it, Ben.
Right. Well, so I, with Sue's help, was taking a look at this building in downtown Brattleboro as a possible investment. I have a long time enthusiasm for historic brick buildings. Grew up in upstate New York, although I live out in Seattle now. And so Vermont was always the promised land. And I had a business connection to Brattleboro, which introduced me to the town. And I thought, oh, well, this, it's a wonderful place, and, it has some nice old building stock. And these are the kinds of things I'm a sucker for. And so was looking at this property, which has been called the Fisher Block for some time, but its original name was the Grange Block. And so Sue encouraged me to roll back to the historic origins of the building. So it's now called the Grange Block. And it's really interesting when you are when there are a lot of interesting competing issues to think about when you're looking at an older building. One social benefit, in my view, of older apartment buildings is they tend to be affordable. And one approach to them is you can come in, you can gut them, you can gussy them up. Historic preservation advocates love that if it's done thoughtfully and carefully. But the automatic consequence of that is that the rents go way up. So you take something, you may preserve the building, but you don't preserve the affordability of the building. And as somebody who works in affordable housing, I try to be sensitive to that and think about that. I also love preserving old buildings. And so in looking at an older building like the Grange Block, there's this sort of balance you have to figure out between how much can I invest in this building to maintain it, how much sustainability investment can I make so that it's more energy efficient, but then what are the impacts going to be on the rents, essentially? You know, are we going to have to kick tenants out while we renovate? Are we going to have to, you know, double the rents to justify the investment? So when I first looked at the building, I you know, appreciated the delightful history that's embedded in its coal boilers chugging away in the basement, but you know, not something I necessarily feel great about owning and contributing to. You know, a couple of semi trucks of coal every year getting combusted, and you know, it feels sort of not great. And then there's a lot of labor involved with these old coal boilers. And so, you know, kind of every other day type ash maintenance. And of course, you know, they're aging. And so how much useful life do they have in them? So that was a real concern for me in thinking about the building. And so as I dug into the possible ways of how to strike that right balance between affordability, sustainability, historic preservation, I had some really fruitful conversations that Sue helped me set up with Nathan on understanding what was possible technically and what was possible in terms of incentives, how the state could support it. And with Froling Energy, which is the vendor that's going to do the installation for us. And ultimately, so the cost of replacing the coal-fired boilers with wood boilers before incentive price of the building. So that was fairly significant.
Oh, I'm
And
sorry,
somewhat,
Dan, your audio froze there for a moment. Can you just repeat?
I'm sorry, yeah. So the cost of replacing the coal-fired boilers with wood pellet boilers is about 10% of the cost of the build, the purchase price of the building. So that was pretty significant as a one-off thing that was not going to, you know, generate any more revenue to pay for itself or anything like that at the surface. So I had to dig in and understand the fuel consumption consequences, and that was actually quite attractive. The building has been spending about $20,000 a year on coal, and it looks like the wood cost is going to be more like $8,000 or $9,000 a year. So that right there, you know, makes it pretty attractive. On the other hand, it's a boiler. It's not going to last 100 years. There's risk involved in an installation. There's disruption to the tenants, disruption to the building. And what really tipped the economics to make it an obvious decision was there are a couple of really good incentive programs that we're able to take advantage of, which bring it down to about a potential 3-year payback for us, which is fantastic and very attractive. And I think Nathan might be planning to address that, so I won't dive in there. But you know, I'm a little leery of combustion. I looked at vertical loop geothermal heat pump, but this building sits on a very small site. So even a vertical loop, I think, would be extremely difficult, not to mention extremely expensive to install. It's got a nice flat roof in the middle of downtown. And so we can, and I hope one day, not too long from now, will do a rooftop solar installation that can cover 25% of the building's electric consumption, but certainly will not, you know, could not do solar hot water and solar heat, which is what would be necessary to replace the coal boiler. So solar wasn't an option. And, you know, an oil-fired boiler would be a reasonable alternative, but I don't want to burn oil anymore and I want to burn coal. So really the wood-fired, oh, and I looked at ductless mini splits as well, to get heat into the units individually with an air heat pump system. But you know, the trouble with that is, first of all, we also have to heat the hot water in the building, and that's being done with the coal-fired boilers. Also, there's the whole issue of common areas and ambient air in the building. And also, frankly, the facade impact of putting in a whole bunch of ductless mini splits through the walls. So this really has, I mean, it's been a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. And I so appreciate you honestly, and this isn't just a little commercial, you made me feel better about what I'm doing. Because I do have that little thing in my ear of like, it's combustion. I'm not really comfortable with combustion. We all know we got to burn less stuff one way or another in general, you know, kind of as a general rule, like we got to find alternatives. And so I've been feeling like this is the right thing to do. And frankly, for me, it's working out very well economically too. It makes me feel really good about owning the building. And what it's going to do is it's going to free up some cash flow to invest in other kinds of renovation. So I'll stop there. Thanks for letting me ramble.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you so much. I am curious, you know, you mentioned other renovation. Have you been able to do anything to the building's envelope itself, like weatherization, to help the building's overall consumption go down in the first place, if that makes any sense?
So we just bought it 3 weeks ago. And so really, honestly, I'm really early stage. And I think we're not big kind of like owning hundreds of buildings all over the place and making big investments right out of the gate type people. So what we'll be doing is taking the money that we earned from the building and reinvesting it back in the building. I do hope that we can do some window weatherization. I don't know, Sue, do you have some things you want to speak to there that you see as opportunities for us?
For the energy saving piece of it.
Yeah, you were talking about lighting a little the other day.
Yeah, I'm about halfway through visiting every single unit in the building and having conversations with all of the occupants about the changes that Ben has discussed about doing and his ideas around the space. Again, focusing on the heat changeover because it is going to impact the tenants significantly. I'm also talking to them about their windows and their plumbing to make sure that we're addressing and focusing on all of those issues that are drains on natural resources. Couple of things that we have done most recently, in 3 weeks, we have resolved 99% of the water leaks that were occurring within the units themselves. And the tenants are embracing the changeover to the new heat system, but they're hoping it's not going to impact them directly. And we're still trying to iron out those details about how that is going to affect them. I told them they'd be given plenty of notice, but I think that they're excited about the change and the energy that Ben is showing in working with them and keeping the building affordable.
I'd love to hear from both of you before we turn to Nathan. I know the state has done a lot with incentives and trying to make some of these changeovers easier on people. But in your experience, as you're going through the process, are there still things either at the local or the state or even the federal level that as people who are moving through this process, it would be easier if this part of the process was changed or improved?
I think that we've encountered more than anything enthusiasm for what Ben's looking to do with the building. I haven't found any huge roadblocks. I haven't found any yet. I don't know if Ben has from his conversations with people.
No, I have to say it's been really nice. I mean, and my other business activities in Vermont have just made me really appreciative of what you have there. And you know, I am out in the Wild West, and Washington isn't so bad, but you know, it's I mean, it really feels like there's a lot of really careful and productive thinking about how to do things in a sustainable way and an economically sustainable way. And I cannot think of a single thing that could have been better. I mean, I guess, I mean, Nathan, I think, has served as a bit of a clearinghouse and for me, for us, and that has been really helpful. I felt like there was a resource there with Efficiency Vermont to draw on. That was really important for us. So I think the fact that Efficiency Vermont is there and there as an advocate is really helpful with both the technical and the economic resources. And my biggest fear has been the installer, of course, has an incentive to promote a positive picture. And I feel that Furling Energy has been very responsible and responsive, and I'm very happy with them as an installer. But when they tell me my fuel cost is going to go from this to this, I'm a little naturally skeptical. Like, well, what if it goes from this to this? Now, I spent a bunch of money, and so knowing that I could triangulate. And Nathan, I'm not going to call you at 2 a.m. on a New Year's Day to like tell you that it's not working out exactly as the numbers were predicted. But still, having a third party to sort of take a look at it there, a technical resource to take a look at it and just kind of validate a little bit, just gave me additional confidence that whatever the actual outcome, at least they're sort of thoughtful, well-educated, knowledgeable people in this field, able to help me make a prudent decision. So no, that was a long way of saying nope, loving it.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Susan. Nathan, I'd love to hear from you about some of the incentives that are being offered right now for folks. But I would also love if you would touch on, it can be kind of daunting to take on these projects. So if you're able to touch on like, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3 for folks so they can at least get started, that would be helpful as well. Oh, are we having... Sue Fillion, would you mind? Thank you.
There we go. We're all set. Ben, thank you so much. That was the perfect lead in, and I'm super excited about this evening. I have had the opportunity to hear Emma speak a bunch of times, and she's right. Like every time I hear, I pick up new kind of cool, interesting information. And I've been on a single-handed kind of crusade to try to transition from high grade, low grade to saw grade and heat grade. And everybody who lives in my house who interacts with me would agree with that. And yeah, so I'm here mostly to represent Efficiency Vermont, actually entirely to represent Efficiency Vermont, and really Ben like nailed the process and the kind of our participation in this process is twofold. I think one of the things that we bring to the table is financial incentives for folks that are interested in doing wood heat conversions or any renewable heating solution. And the second tier of what we kind of pride ourselves on is the ability to work with a customer like Ben or like Emma or like a homeowner to advocate for them in terms of our technical prowess. So these systems are sometimes complicated, and sometimes a customer may not have familiarity with it. And so what we do is we provide essentially an engineer, an industry professional to work for and with the owner on their behalf to help them navigate through the process of this heating system conversion. And that is different for every single customer and can be as simple as somebody calls me and is looking for a recommendation for a contractor who could come in and give them a quote for a pellet heating system, or as complex as a large kind of almost industrial, but I would say, multifamily project like Ben's, where we spent a couple of pretty intense days doing cost analysis and cost benefit analysis and life cycle cost, and kind of we provide that information in a way that is useful and beneficial to the owner. And really we're so happy to help. Like we've got kind of a handful of folks that are like me, that have a long history of expertise in this area, and ironically, maybe anybody on this call who would call into Efficiency Vermont for wood heating help would probably land on my desk I do a bunch of work in the southern part of Vermont, and I definitely find that there's a really kind of high concentration of responsible wood heat users in that area, and it's perfect. It's great, and I'm excited to kind of maybe get into some questions.
Before we get into questions, Nate, would you be willing to put contact information in the chat for folks if they want to reach out to you later?
Yeah, I would, absolutely. And I can hit on maybe specifically, especially on the residential side, the incentives are currently set where we would call them like a custom incentive. So for a homeowner who's willing to look at a new heating system, the incentive from Efficiency Vermont is a $3,000 incentive. And as part of our relationship with the customer, we'll also work with them and their contractor to apply for an additional $3,000 from an organization that we all commonly refer to as the RERC. So that's a total of $6,000 from combination of Efficiency Vermont and the RERC. And on the commercial side, a project like Ben's or a industrial facility, it's really it's a lot more complicated than a residential system, and so it's really economic based. We work with the customer. We generally will bring in the contractor, and we try to really dig down and investigate kind of what the use case is and what the goals are, and look at some sometimes some possible financing. And so on the commercial and industrial side, it's really one off, and those are kind of those are certainly really interesting projects. But I love Ben's story. I love his building, and I can't wait to see that project through. And it's going to be a really incredible before and after. And yeah, I'll make sure to get my name, contact, email, and phone number into the chat for anybody who's looking.
Thank you. Thank you so much to everyone. Emma, yes.
Yeah, I just want to tack one thing onto those incentives for residential users specifically. At the end of last year, in that giant 5,000-page omnibus spending bill that passed included the BTU Act. And what that is a 26% federal tax credit for residential users purchasing a wood heating appliance with 75% efficiency or greater. So that's 20, and that includes both the appliance and installation. So it's 26% off of a pellet stove, a wood stove, a cordwood boiler, a pellet boiler, whatever, which is huge. And that 26% comes off first before you then subtract any additional state rebates that you might apply for. So that's a really important piece of math that made these boiler systems a lot more affordable and closer to parity for folks.
Thank you, Emma. Appreciate that. Just a few other comments. So if folks have questions, start sending them in so we can throw them to our panelists. Just so everyone knows, the slides that Emma showed earlier will be included in the recording that we're doing right now. And you can find that recording. The Town Energy Committee is going to put a link on their Facebook page. And then there will also be on the town's website, brattleboro.org. You can go to the, under committees, you can find the Town Energy Committee, and then you can find a link on that page as well. So thank you so much for joining us to everyone tonight. So one question, just for, I think this might be for Emma or Nathan. If someone has an existing oil furnace with forced hot water heat that also heats the water, can one just substitute the oil furnace for a pellet boiler and still use the same infrastructure throughout the rest of the house in the same way?
Yeah, we call that the boiler system and the distribution system. So the boiler is responsible for making the hot water, and the distribution system is responsible for actually doing the house heat. And absolutely, an existing distribution system can be integrated into a new pellet boiler or pellet furnace system. So absolutely, and that integration, sometimes it's really simple and sometimes it's fairly complicated, but I think Ben spoke to the fact that we are so fortunate here in Vermont in that our contractor network that works on these types of systems, they're as good as anywhere in the country, and highly qualified to work with an individual to make sure that integration is correct. And if they have any questions or the homeowner has any questions, we at Efficiency Vermont deal with those questions, I would say, daily.
Thank you, Nathan. Emma, anything you want to add?
No, and Nathan got it. The only thing I might add as a piece of just like educational info when thinking about what heating system you have is we hear this a lot. So boiler versus furnace. If you have radiators in your house, so there's like hot water running through your house, you have a boiler, right? That's boiling hot water. And if you have ducts coming in, spewing hot air, you have a furnace. So that might make the conversations you have with installers a little bit easier, just to know which one you have to start with for distribution.
Thank you. I think I saw a question flash by about the costs you showed, Emma, earlier in your presentation. Those were all pre-incentives, right?
Yes, pre-tax credit, pre-incentive.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I know every energy project is individual to the people and to the building, but are there any situations that any of you have seen that you're like, yes, this is perfect for wood heat, or absolutely not, walk away, put down the cords of wood, don't even think about it?
Nathan, you wanna
I'm
take that
gonna
one or
jump
me?
right in and say that Ben's project is it's perfect, and it's perfect because it's an existing kind of legacy coal boiler system, but it's perfect because it's a mixed use building. Like many other buildings in Vermont, it's of older stock, and older stock buildings are sometimes not they're not as good a fit for a heat pump, because heat pumps, they're not quite as robust. You really cannot beat a high mass pellet boiler system for a robust heating system. So, you know, a building with a boiler that's reached the end of its useful life is really the ideal scenario for making a conversion to pellets or wood chips, or so in a building that's a kind of Ben's size is really perfect. It fits into this nice. It's not so big that the boiler is massive required and is very expensive. It's kind of small enough that the equipment is what I would almost consider unitary. So it's cost effective, and so no, I've yet to run across any building ever in this part of the country that wouldn't be well suited for a well thought out wood heating system.
And in general, do you recommend if folks are just starting the process and they've got their beginning pot of money, is it better spent on changing the infrastructure or weatherization?
Whew, I feel like you're asking a bunch of fans
Yeah.
of wood heating systems. So I'm going to lean on that and say that I feel like, again, I'm going to use Ben as an example, and I think he's made the right decisions in the correct order.
Fantastic, thank you.
If I could just jump in on that, I would
Yes.
say when I start thinking about you asked Olga about what weatherization programs we might add, and I certainly think over time the ability to burn fewer pellets, to burn less fuel is going to be a good opportunity to do the right thing and save a little more money. But frankly, I think the return on that investment is going to be pretty low. I think I felt that I needed to to sort of cross the hurdle of feeling comfortable buying the building. I needed a heating solution, and the boiler replacement did that for me. And then everything else feels like it's going to be sustainability gravy, and with maybe a little bit of economic benefit, although the payback will probably be very long. So getting a nice, attractive payback from the initial boiler is going to make it easier to do the weatherization investments over time.
Thank you. Well, and thank you for that, Ben, because I think it points to how individual every project is and all the different factors you have to take into it. curious, what percentage or how many pellet suppliers source from sustainably managed forests? And are there any other mechanisms that ensure sustainable management on harvests that take place not on UVA properties? And I'm sorry, I don't know what UVA means because
No, that's use value appraisal. That's current use. That's the like tax right program for large forest parcels.
thank you.
and
You
ag.
mentioned that earlier. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I think I'm understanding the heart of your question. It's a little bit harder to answer than you would realize. So there isn't that much. There is in the Northeast, there is some land that is FSC certified, but not that much because that's actually a fairly onerous program to become a part of. You have to have a very large parcel. And it's kind of like organic certification, right? We're like, sometimes it's just doesn't make financial sense for a farmer to actually go for organic certification. It doesn't always make sense for a forest landowner to go for FSC certification, but that doesn't mean it isn't sustainably managed. And by and large, with very rare exceptions, we feel in Vermont, which is really the only place I can speak for, we're doing a really good job. Very rarely do we see cuts that are beyond the pale or outside of a forest management plan. And the vast majority of wood that is going to a pellet mill is coming from UVA because that's land that's being actively managed. Those smaller forest parcels that aren't enrolled, that's really when you're getting into like 10 acres, 20 acres, that's really just someone with 20 acres behind the house. That's not actually an actively managed piece, even though it's still part of our big forest land picture. So with rare exception, we feel comfortable saying that Vermont's forests are sustainably managed. I think there was a second part to that question too. Can you remind me?
Yes. Are there any other mechanisms that ensure sustainable management on harvests that take place on, like you said, those acres that aren't certified?
Yeah, there's not really any sort of big picture oversight. I can't say that there is really. We don't have any red flags around that that are keeping us up at night. We feel overall things are going well, and that we're keeping forest as forest, and that's really the goal.
Thank you, Emma. Do the incentives require owners to weatherize first before they get incentives for the wood heat?
No.
No, that's easy. Thank you, both of you. If you have a historic house with forced hot air and electric hot water, what should you do? Should you switch out the furnace for a wood furnace, but keep the electric hot water? Or could the water be heated by the new furnace? That's a good one.
That is a good one. I'll take that one. I think if I owned a historic house and I was in that scenario, if the furnace was at or near the end of its life, I would replace it with a pellet furnace. We have easy access to a really well manufactured pellet furnace here in Vermont. It's rock solid. It's a really nice piece of equipment. I think in terms of other pellet heating equipment, it's cost effective. And I think I would probably then let my water heater reach the end of its usable life. And maybe I would think, in the future, like let's say that water heater's maybe got 4 or 5 years. I think in 4 or 5 years from now, we're going to see a good reduction in the cost of heat pump water heater technology. And I think I would probably, if it was my house, I think that's the order I would go in.
Me too.
Thank you, both of you. So this is a question kind of about demand and sustainable sourcing. Is there enough demand for wood pellets that a new wood pellet production plant will be needed, or are any planned for this area?
Yeah, it's a great question. We would love to see another one. There was a second right now. Sorry, let me back up a smidge. Right now in Vermont, there is one Vermont there's one pellet mill in Vermont Wood Pellet in St. Clarendon near Rutland. They make a very premium product, and they do not make enough of it to meet all of Vermont's pellet demand. And they actually export most of their pellets in bagged form to Massachusetts and Connecticut because they have a great customer base there. And that's okay, because there are really excellent pellets being made next door in New York, New Hampshire, and Maine. So the forest products industry in the Northeast has always been a regional one, and that's fine. You know, trees cross the river into New Hampshire to become pellets, and then they come back. This is a raise all ship situation in terms of the low grade wood market. So that's okay that the pellets are not strictly being made in Vermont. That said, we would love to see another small scale pellet mill, much like Vermont Wood Pellet, open up. And we do hear talk of such a thing happening, but it's a hard industry to be in, you know, low margins, and small scale mills is really what works best in Vermont, which makes that even trickier for a low margin industry. So we're very supportive. We'd love to see that happen. I think that the demand could be there, but there's plenty of supply, and the mills that are in our neighboring states are able to have the capacity to create substantially more pellets than they are now. So there's plenty of opportunity to meet a growing demand with regionally sourced pellets without a problem.
Thank you. What programs are available to help low-income households acquire a biomass heat system in their home, given the upfront costs?
Yeah, so there's a few different things. There's through the local, gosh, I'm keeping of Capstone because that's the one near me, but through local organizations, there are sometimes additional incentives available on wood and pellet stoves in particular for low-income households. So that's something to look into. And that I have yet to see those on boilers. I've only seen those on stoves, but there is often additional financing available for stoves. And then the financing piece to actually get a loan on it, there is up to 0% financing available through a heat saver loan through Vermont State Employees Credit Union. And that financing, so the percentage rate is based on your income. So the lowest income bracket is eligible for 0% financing, and then it goes up to 5% from there, depending on your household income.
Thank you. Nathan, anything you want to add?
Yeah, the Efficiency Vermont is an excellent resource for those financing options that Emma had mentioned, and Efficiency Vermont does a lot of support work for that wood stove changeout program. And I wouldn't necessarily call me if you've got questions on financing, but we have people who are to financing like I am to wood heating.
Thank you. Staying in that vein of incentives, what should be changed to incentivize wood heating or renewable heating in general to help more landlords provide this for tenants? I'm assuming, one, to keep rents down, but two, if tenants care about something like renewable energy, which I imagine they care as much as landlords. I don't know who can jump in on that.
That's hard. And Nathan, I was pausing because I know EVT thinks about landlord incentives cost a lot. If you want to take that one.
Yeah, I'll take that one. I think I'll kind of break landlords into maybe two categories. I think there's landlords who own large buildings with many apartments, and I think we actually do see we see a lot of adoption of renewable pellet heating in those large multifamily applications. And I think that the other kind of classification of landlord would be somebody who owns maybe like a duplex or a single family home. And, you know, the landlord is subject to the exact same incentives, the same technical advice, the same support that a homeowner would be. And it's by the address of the home. So if the landlord lives out of state, if the home is in Vermont, we would treat that home just like we would treat the neighbor's house that might be owner occupied.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if I answered the question. I think maybe there was a component of the question as to like maybe what could we do to provide more incentive for it, and I think I agree with Emma that is a tough one.
It's hard, it's just 'cause, and this is something that, the people in Nathan and I's lives that create rebates, this is just a struggle, because if you have a landowner or not landowner, a landlord who doesn't pay for the utilities because their tenants pay for the utilities, the landlord doesn't have much incentive to rip out everything and put in more efficient something, something, and something, because they're already passing those costs on. So this is sort of a bigger conversation beyond wood of how to approach that incentive structure, and target landlords and encourage them to do that. It's certainly easier in scenarios where either the boiler or whatever it is has just kicked the bucket, so it's off the table to begin with, or the landlord includes utilities in their rent, because then they have a different incentive. But yeah, ongoing, good question. If whoever asked that has a great idea, we would love to pass it on.
Yeah, I would.
Susan and Ben, any thoughts from your perspectives?
I'm sorry?
Anything you want to add just based on your experience as building owners and building managers?
I not only manage Ben's property, I own 3 of my own investment properties and I pay the utilities. So it does matter to me. I wish I had been more aware of the options available to landlords. I just put in a new hot air furnace in one of my units that was complicated by a very bad venting system that ended up costing twice what it should have cost me to replace the oil forced hot air heat system. If I had had access to better information and resources, I probably would have gone with something more efficient that would have benefited me and also not have me contemplating increasing rents on my tenants in the upcoming year to cover those costs. I think some of the incentives that might be valuable for landlords who are not incentivized by providing heat for their tenants would be to offer them an opportunity to upgrade the heating systems for their tenants with some kind of an incentive program, either through a property tax type of incentive or a payback once they've converted over a system and can show marketable reduction in heat costs to their tenants. That's just a quick thought off the top of my head.
Thank you. Thank you. How can someone tell if they are using like good wood pellets?
Good question. There's a few ways. I have on our website a brochure that's a guide to buying pellets, and that's honestly a good place to start. I would reference that. But what you're looking for are ash content, BTUs, and it's sort of an interesting fun fact for pellets. When people are very familiar when heating with wood stoves, that we prefer to heat with hardwoods because they have more energy per wood than a piece of softwood does. That's actually the opposite is true for heating with pellets. The preference is for softwood because they have a lower ash content. So you can buy good quality hardwood pellets, you can buy good quality mixed soft and hardwood pellets, but sort of the super premium product is usually all softwood. So don't be turned off if you're sort of new to pellet heating and you see a softwood pellet as the premium. It's real. Nathan, do you want to talk about the particular technicals of what to look for on a pellet bag?
Yeah, I think I will say that for customers that have delivery. So if you're a homeowner or a property owner and you receive bulk pellets, and that simply means like the truck comes and they put the pellets into your bin or silo or bag for you. I think you can pretty much assure that you're getting a high quality product. there's like Emma said, there's only a few mills around that produce the high volume pellets that end up in those trucks, and they are all excellent. The fuel is high grade. When you're looking at, if you're looking for bagged fuel, yeah, the best thing to do is, I think primarily some bagged fuel, I think if you buy from large groups, it will actually, some bagged fuel is FSC certified. And so I think if you purchase an FSC certified bag and it will say that on it, you're guaranteed that you're getting sustainably harvested pellets. Other than that, you want to look at the ash content and the number of BTUs per pound. And all of those numbers are displayed on the bag. And certainly if you're at a large vendor and you can kind of drag a couple bags over and put them all next to each other, you can kind of start to size them up. But yeah, Emma's right. It's softwood is kind of where it's at for pellets.
Thank you. So staying on the topic of pellets, do regional pellet manufacturers get their pellets from basically the same pool of sources? Or are there any that source more from Vermont forestry operations? And how would you know that, as the buyer?
I mean, Vermont wood pellet is all sourced from Vermont. I mean, it's really just where it is, right? Because low-grade wood logs are a high volume, low margin product. So if you start moving them too far, you start losing money very quickly. So no one is really bringing in logs from very far away. So everyone's going to be sourcing from within a fairly close radius to their mill.
Thank you. Are there situations where maybe you as a building owner want to use renewable heat, but biomass is not the best solution?
I think I could look past my passion for wood heating and say that yes, there are some technologies that are considered renewable. I mean, the option, if you want to be fossil fuel free, is either to use a solid fuel based heating system or something that's electrically based. And what, the key word there would be heat pumps. So I think Ben mentioned that he did study looking at air source heat pumps. There's some water source heat pumps, and Ben also mentioned his desire to do ground source heat pumps, but he was limited by the ground. So yes, there are alternatives to be what I would consider close to net zero or net zero ready, and outside of combustion, and they would be electrically based. And at this point, it would be some sort of heat pump technology.
I say the two things that sort of on either end, the times we see it when it doesn't work is on the doesn't work for wood end is if you're in something like you own a condo in a 3-family building and you don't have anywhere to put wood because you're downtown and you're just one person, like you don't have total control of the building. That's an example where it might not work. And then on the other end, the times when a heat pump doesn't work is, and you're trying to get completely off fossil fuels, is if it's not a particularly high performance build. So like what Ben has, if it's a little bit drafty, heat pumps are great. They're really impressive technology, but Vermont's housing stock is not as impressive as a heat pump. So you just need more load for a lot of the buildings that we have, and a heat pump can't creep up to completely remove fossil fuels from your picture. So if you want to get completely off fossils and your building isn't high performance, wood is a better choice.
And for folks who own mobile homes, are there any renewable energy technology that you feel is better for that type of structure than, say, the typical brick and mortar?
I think a pellet stove in a mobile home or a modular home is well fit. They're generally very easy to vent. You don't run into the same venting complications that you do with a cordwood boiler, and they're generally compact. They're fairly quiet, and they're easy to kind of locate, and they come in a vast array of sizes. And you know, if your living room is 1,200 square feet, you maybe don't necessarily want the same device that you would want if your living room is 400 square feet. And so it's easy to pick the right piece.
Great, thank you, Nathan. I believe this is our last question, which, you know, 7:29, we're doing pretty good. Are there any wood pellets on the market in New England that have been sourced in quote unquote bad practices, such as from plantation trees in Southern US?
No. I think that just, they wouldn't make it here. So because of what, like, we don't practice plantation style forestry in the Northeast. And it would be too far to move them. That makes sense. I mean, what you might see that, like, you might not be thrilled about is if someone maybe say clear cut something to build a housing development. You don't really want to say like, well, those trees should just go to waste, right? Like, let's do something with them. But as a whole, no, we feel good about the sustainable forest practices behind all the pellets created in the Northern United States.
Thank you. Oh, I take that back. We had one more question come through that I hope to grab.
Excuse me, I just, I'm sorry to interrupt, Olga. I just wanted to say I need to jump because I have another call. So just so appreciate getting a chance to participate in this. Really appreciate Nathan and Emma and Sue, of course. And thanks for moderating, Olga.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
thanks,
much for
Ben.
joining
I'm so
us.
excited to see your project.
Thanks.
Last question. Insurance companies discourage the use of wood or pellet stoves in rental units. Are there insurance companies that are supportive that you know of, either any of you?
I can take that, or do you want to?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. I mean, as a landlord, if I were a landlord, I probably wouldn't put a stove in a unit. Just because is that my personal feeling, as I just don't trust people. To like, stoves need attention, and I just wouldn't trust a regular tenant with the stove. I would happily trust them to run a thermostat on a pellet boiler. And I would happily put a stove of any kind in my own home. As for insurance purposes, for wood heating in general, something we used to hear a few years ago, especially, was, you know, insurance companies were confused about the concept of a pellet boiler, not realizing that it was not a pellet stove, and it is in fact a complete replacement for your central heating system. And so they tried to tell people that they wouldn't insure them if they got a pellet boiler, but they've since been educated and understand that you can leave for 2 months to go to Florida in the winter with a pellet boiler and your house will be fine. So when people do very rarely still hear that sort of thing from their insurance companies, it almost invariably is a big national company. And when they go through a Vermont-based insurance broker, it's not a problem because they know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think you have to say it's a pellet furnace versus a pellet stove.
Yeah, not a stove. This is this is attached to a thermostat. We're good.
Yeah, stoves require a little more cleaning,
Mhm.
maintenance than furnace from the homeowner's perspective.
Mhm.
Thank you. We, I think we have come to end of time and end of questions, but I want to thank all three of you for joining us tonight, and thank you, Ben, who just stepped off. Any last minute thoughts to leave people with, or any last minute resources you want to just get on the record before we all head out for the evening?
I'd like to say thank you to the other panelists and to you for hosting. This was excellent, and certainly I encourage anybody who has questions that they think I might be able to help with, or Efficiency Vermont, certainly feel free to call me direct, or give us a call at Efficiency Vermont, and we will, if we can't help, we'll find you somebody who can.
Mhm.
Thank you. Emma,
Yes, again, thank you for hosting. And I think you'll find, as Ben found, that there's a lot of people that are very happy and willing and enthusiastic about helping you figure out how to put in renewable appliances in your homes or business in Vermont. And we will bend over backwards to figure out some money or financing for you. We will try so hard. So please feel free to reach out and we'll get you set up with whatever we can come up with.
fantastic.
And I'm going to throw the offer out there if people want to come watch our project as it progresses. We're hoping to start late spring. I'd love to be able to introduce people to the process a little bit. It's a bigger skill than a home thing. But also thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about our project.
Thank you for joining us. Just a last minute reminder to everyone, the slides that Emma had in her presentation earlier in this conversation are part of this recording. And the recording can be found, there will be a link on the Town Energy Committee's Facebook page, as well as their page on the town website, brattleboro.org. So again, thank you everyone for joining us tonight, and we hope you all have a wonderful evening. Take care.